virtual evening program, and this month is our first ever virtual green building tour. So we have a lot of firsts going on. So I'm looking forward to learning all about the Maryland Heights Community Center. But before we get started, I wanted to share a few updates. As part of our shift to providing virtual programming and opportunities to connect, we launched an every other week coffee break. These are on Fridays at 10 a.m. and are meant to provide you with an opportunity to connect with your green building community on a timely topic. Last week, we had a great discussion about environmental justice led by Dr. Christine Ikinga from Washington University. Next Friday, which is July 24th, Dr. Katie Maestrala will be our featured guest discussing skills for sustainability professionals. If you have suggestions for future guests or topics, please feel free to be in touch with our staff or our education committee. We also just added an in-depth session to the calendar for July 30th entitled, "You Light Up My Life, but is that a good thing?" This session will explore the non-visual impact of light. We also have a request for qualifications open right now to develop a business plan for an energy resources hub. This is an outgrowth of our work with the City of St. Louis. The hub will support building owners that have to comply with the city's new building energy performance standard. Qualifications are due this Friday, which is July 17th, and more information is available on our website. Before we get started, I wanted to extend many thank yous to the team at Canon Design for their hard work on putting together this tour. When they submitted a proposal for this tour last year, we all thought it would be in person at the building. Well, things have changed quite a bit for all of us, and so they have done a wonderful job of adapting to that change. Now, I would like to introduce Tracy Anderson. Tracy Anderson is the former Community Center Director and now Director of Parks and Recreation for Maryland Heights. So Tracy.
Thanks, Angela. Yeah, I too, when Cindy brought this to my attention, obviously I love to showcase the city and the building that I have the opportunity and pleasure of running, staffing, and serving the community. And because of COVID, we've all suffered immensely with the connection with our constituents. We have just reopened our building following the county guidelines, as many people would know. Started out 25% of capacity, now to 50% capacity, and who knows what tomorrow will bring with the increase of COVID positive individuals. But I think the sustainable piece that is probably the most important to me is I came on board just as the facility was nearing completion. So had the pleasure of meeting several folks from Canon, David included, and got to give my 2 cents toward the ending piece of this construction project. And it was one of those where you're like, wow, everything is in the same building. You don't have to go to multiple facilities. And it's kind of like a one-stop shop. But one of the things that I found that was probably the most important was there was a lot of community engagement, from whether it was the different commissions that the city had to residents coming and being able to give their input, to the council members, to just various groups, whether it was school groups, organizations. And so they really, really tried to take into the design of the building all the wants and needs, but also when you actually, if you have not seen the building or had the pleasure of coming inside the building, which you will virtually, it's hard to describe what the building looks like from the inside when you only drive by it. Some call it a spaceship, but you definitely see that it's an icon in Maryland Heights, and you can see it from 270. So there's a lot of people that will come through our community and want to know, what is that building? What do you do there? And I always encourage people to come in because it really is mind-blowing when you walk into the facility. So I'm pretty sure that based on the tour and the visual aids that you will see this evening, It's not going to be 100% where we would like it to be, but in these times, I think that they've done a pretty good job of highlighting some of the really unique features about this facility. As far as people utilizing it, we have, up until the COVID period, we're receiving between 17,000 and 20,000 people a month in the facility. There are a lot of amenities that are in there. So the 92,000 square foot building has the capacity to have that many people in and not be on top of one another. So I look forward to seeing, questions that people have and giving any kind of information that I can to help as people navigate or try to understand the importance of feedback from the constituents or other designers as far as things that have worked and haven't worked. Feel free to ask questions that you have on your mind. And at this time, I want to introduce David. David is the executive designer from Canon and was the key personnel that was involved in this project. And without it, there's a lot of unique features of it. So I attribute that to all the hard work that was put in there.
Thanks, Tracy.
Yep.
Welcome, everyone. I'm really happy to be here tonight. And first, I want to introduce our docents for the tour, our virtual docents, members of our Canon design team here. As Tracy said, I'm David Polzin, Director of Design for Canon Design. I've been with Canon for going on 22 years now. And I was, as Tracy said, intimately involved in this project from the very beginning. So it's very near and dear to my heart. I'm joined tonight by Mark McManus, who's our office engineering leader. He has over 2.5 decades as a mechanical engineer with a broad range of experiences on different building types. And he is also the engineer of record for the project. So he's going to talk to us about some of the technologies in the building and the innovations around how the systems work. You've already met Tracy. Colin Hale is on Mark's team. He's an energy modeler and mechanical engineer. With our firm, he leads engineering teams through complex new construction and renovation projects. But he's also involved at a firm-wide level in terms of our sustainability initiatives, particularly those around the tools and technologies we use. And he's helping the firm move toward being carbon neutral in all of our designs by 2030. And last but not least, Elise Novak is a project architect and designer with our firm. And she has a broad range of experience across rec projects, education projects, commercial and healthcare projects. She has been the lead administrator from start to finish on 2 LEED projects. And she has a unique background in environmental planning, which really gives her a unique perspective on sustainable design. And she is our office leader. Colin?
Thanks, David. Yeah, we've already heard from Tracy. We've already heard from David. Here quickly, we'll take a look at some of the learning objectives. So following that, our virtual tour tonight is going to consist of 2 or 3 phases. Initially, we're going to take a look at the building through a PowerPoint slide deck. So we're going to be highlighting the building features using 2D stills. But then we're going to take a pause from the PowerPoint and we're going to move into a Matterport 3-dimensional model where we can virtually navigate the space, starting in the lobby and moving through a number of the key spaces in the building. And then once we've gotten to the point where we're moving into the mechanical rooms and the aquatic center, we'll step back into that PowerPoint and visit the building again with 2-dimensional slides. And with that, we'll then conclude with some questions and some discussion. So tonight, we have 4 main learning objectives. We've actually already started talking about one and looking at Maryland Heights sustainability vision for this project. But the other 3 are going to consist of taking a look at how LEED version 4 compares to LEED version 2009 with respect to a number of credits that were achieved on this particular project. And so with that, I want to turn it back over to David to walk through some of the site strategies and the concepts that we've explored.
Thanks. So since I was involved with the project from the beginning, I thought it might be fun to show you some of the buildings that it didn't become, some of the ideas and concepts that it didn't become, and talk through the process a little bit. I loved all the comments in the chat around community engagement, and certainly during the feasibility portion of this study, we did engage the community, particularly around the development of the building program and the goals and aspirations for the project. Really kicked off schematic design in November of 2013 and continued that phase into early 2014. And so at that point, we were working with a two-court multi-use gym, group exercise rooms, a jogging track, a natatorium, a weight fitness space, but also in addition to those recreational functions, some community functions. So babysitting, a preschool, a senior center, a multi-use event room. So it was always the vision of the community, and then in particular the city council, the city administrator, the mayor, that this building address all generations within Maryland Heights, that it be a multi-generational building in addition to being a rec building. And so it always had this kind of dual identity. In schematic design, we presented 3 ideas, and one of them was what we call the Boomerang, which you see on the screen now. This placed the two-court multi-use gym at the elbow of these 2 legs, which contains some of the smaller spaces. We had what we call the split scheme, which really took this mission of recreation and community functions and said, well, let's create 2 distinct volumes for those, and we'll join them in this kind of shared courtyard where everyone will enter the building and then decide what direction to go. In all these concepts, it was really important that the building be highly visible on Interstate 270, and that it really become an icon for the community. The scheme that the city council and administration finally settled on, I had forgotten until I dug these out for this tour, was called the fish scheme. And it was the really in many ways the most consolidated scheme in terms of being an efficient plan, all functions housed under one roof, and while organic in shape, its skin to floor area ratio was very efficient. And I'll talk in a moment here about that organic shape and why that was. We did, in the very beginning of the design process with these concepts, look at the energy use of the building. We weren't really talking to the city council about PEUI at that time, but we wanted to put it in a language that was familiar to them, that they could consider to be really tangible. So we were talking about it in terms of annual utility costs. And so what we have found as a practice is that particularly with these large scale civic and institutional buildings, oftentimes the delta between different building forms is fairly modest, as you can see here in these graphs, but still measurable. I mean, part of this has to do with just kind of the internal loads, the scale of the spaces, and those are
explain stuff in the back.
But clearly this was a factor in the selection of the winning scheme, if you will, that this was the most efficient building in terms of its energy performance and its utility usage. But one of the factors that, LEED doesn't address in real depth, but was really important to the city council were acoustics. And I'm not talking only about acoustics within the building, but actually site acoustics. The decibel levels that one is experiencing standing out near I-270 are, up in the 80, 90 decibel range, and you can see there the kind of the scale factor of what that really feels like. Any of you have stood alongside an interstate know how impactful that is. To actually also be able to use the site, but not have this deafening sound that was really going to limit how the site was used. And so we had always talked about the building as being an acoustical sound absorber and a kind of a barrier. And so we did a lot of acoustical analysis during the course of looking at these different options. And you can see with where we ended with the scheme on the left, what our acousticians referred to as an acoustic shadow. So the building, through this organic inflection, was actually creating this acoustic shadow on the site, which then really allows that entry court and that parking lot to be used for a variety of outdoor functions for the community in Northern Heights, and have it be really a habitable place for people. You can see by contrast the option on the right, which was under serious consideration, was really filling that acoustic shadow, and so was not really utilizing the site or giving the opportunity for the city to utilize that site in flexible ways. So it was really an important part of the design process. This concept was really considered to be integrated into the landscape, and this is intended to be a companion building to Aquaport. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Aquaport there, which is immediately to the north. And so this was a kind of a deferential form in terms of how it inflected into the landscape and how it faced Aquaport. In our original concept, we really saw the entire roof as a green roof, as a way to mitigate some of the stormwater issues and actually just visually extend that landscape up onto the roof. As we worked through the project, worked through budgeting, worked through the goals of the city council, that started to scale back to be a part of the roof, and then ultimately ended up where we are today with the building, where it really becomes a grass berm that is this element that really the building tapers into, and actually serves this really bold function by creating outdoor space at the north end of the building for both the multi-use, multi-purpose room and for the preschool, and still ends up creating this kind of sheltered space, outdoor space that's not overwhelmed by the highway that's adjacent. So so this use of landscape in terms of integrating the building also creates outdoor space. So here you see the final building from the exterior, and you can see in this early section the idea that this building really is part of the landscape, that it emerges from the landscape, and that it rises to the south, that in early concepts, this would have all been green roof. But I think the initial intent of the building really was preserved. And when we talk about the natatorium a little later on the tour, one of the tenets of recreational center planning is to actually have indoor aquatic centers or natatoria, be able to have access to southern and specifically southwestern daylight, which is, the most intense solar orientation. So in many other kinds of occupancies, we're actually trying to shelter people from the southwestern sun. In this case, because people are getting out of a pool, they're wet, they're in a controlled environment, actually having access to those intense rays of sun and that energy from the southwestern sun is actually really important. In terms, just a brief word about the envelope. The building is really anchored with brick masonry, obviously a material that is regional. It helps anchor this building to the ground. The cap of the building then is this metal panel, which through its depth conceals the structure, the long span structure over the multi-use spaces. And then finally, the translucent glazing, along with these cuts of vision glass, which really admit a lot of daylight into this space in a controlled way, but in a really soft way, and you'll see this on the tour. And then these moments where you can actually see out and connect to the landscape with view. So all of the elements of the facade were really contributing in many ways to the overall wellness of the occupancy and the experience of the building.
Okay, so we're going to move to talking about some of the site strategies. This is an overview of the points that were earned for the project. We were in version 2009 and we achieved the silver certification. And as you can see, the site selection points were a huge component to our certification and the number of points we got. And if you include the water efficient landscaping and then the innovation in design and regional priority credits that are associated with site, that gives us a total of 26 of our 55 points. So site was definitely a key strategy for us. So moving on to an aerial of the Maryland Heights area. Our project is in that red dot in the middle, and it's pretty close to a central commercial corridor of Dorset Road, and then right along McKelvey Road, which has a number of residential developments along it. And so given the location, it was pretty easy to qualify for the site selection, development density, and public transportation access points. And then focusing in more closely on credit 2, the development density and community connectivity credit. Under version 2009, we had to identify a residential area within that half-mile radius you see and show that it had a density of 10 units per acre or more. And then we had to identify 10 basic services with pedestrian access to the project. And we achieved 5 points that way. Under version 4, the credit is called surrounding density and diverse uses. And it's slightly different where, interestingly, when you're calculating the density, they reduce the radius to 1/4 of a mile around the site, and you need to include all residential and non-residential buildable land in your calculations. So we would need to go back and recalculate our exact density to see whether we would achieve our 3 points that we did, or to get 2 points, you at least need 22,000 square feet per acre of buildable land. And then the other component, we definitely still would have earned the 2 points by having more than 8 diverse uses within walking distance. So moving on to looking at the site plan itself, you can see the various other site-related credits that we earned. We have bike parking in the middle of the site. There's a bike path that goes through the site and actually connects to the Fifi Greenway, which you see on the north end of the site. And there are also paths connecting to the Aquaport water park across on the opposite end of the site from us. In terms of the low emitting and fuel efficient vehicle credit 4.3, we were under version 2009, we were required to provide 5% of the parking spaces as preferred parking for the fuel efficient vehicles. In LEED version 4, there's an additional requirement where 9 of those 23 spaces that we provided would need to include a refueling station, such as an electric vehicle charging station or something like that. So to achieve this, we probably would have looked at opportunities to use PV arrays to offset that additional electric load. The next slide shows water management strategies that were used. For stormwater control, the bioretention ponds were a big part of our stormwater control, as well as planting areas within the parking lots. And then for water use itself, native plant species were used to reduce the landscape water use by 50%. Another part of the site design was creating a landscape buffer along the service road to further enhance the park-like feeling of the site in general. So tall shrubs and trees were chosen to create that visual screen. And then another big objective of both the site and the building was universal design and accessibility. On the site, that shows with the landscape, various landscape furniture elements are included for sitting, and there are various paths running through the site for more active purposes. And then that landscaped berm connects visually to the aquaport across the site and just engages with people as they're approaching the building. So that's a view that I just mentioned from the north of looking at that berm and the building beyond. And then these are aerial views from inside the building of one of the bioretention ponds, and then showing that planting at this stage in the parking lot. So we're going to start moving inside. This is the first floor plan. We've highlighted the areas that we're going to see today. Just to give you a bit of orientation, we'll be entering in the lobby, which is central to the building, and it has visual connections to all the various program elements. On the south side of the building, like David mentioned, is where the aquatic center and locker rooms are located. The gym's immediately adjacent to the lobby. And then on the north side of the building, there are various functions, including multi-generational uses like a daycare, a preschool, and event space. And then upstairs on that north end, there's also a senior center. And then we'll also see the weight fitness side on the opposite side of the second floor, and the track running around that whole area. So that concludes our site part of the discussion. So we're going to move over to the virtual model and to the lobby. And I think David's going to start with describing some of those design elements that were employed there.
Yeah, thanks, Elise. So the primary feature of the lobby is really the fact that you can see most of the major functions just standing in the center of that space. So we created a lot of transparency to the two-court gym. You can see up the stairs behind the check-in desk to the weight fitness space. You can see the natatorium beyond, but also you have that connection to the outside. So you can look back to where you came in, and you can see, you can see out. There's a lot of daylight in this space, and so as we spin around, you can kind of see how that inflection in the building form actually creates this outdoor space. The other one of the other key features of the building is the jogging track. The jogging track actually circumscribes the building at level 2, and so you can see that above the entry vestibule. And the jogging track actually, it cuts through all of the major spaces of the building. So it goes through the aquatic center, it goes around Weight Fitness, it goes around the gym, and then comes back through the lobby. And so that experience on the jogging track is one of the most wonderful ways to experience the building. The other thing we did with the roof structure is we extended the long span from the gym into the lobby. So it's really one giant sheltering form that that really encloses the space. You can see how we controlled sound with the ceiling baffles, and how we concealed the linear lighting within those baffles. And then of course, you know, it goes without saying the lobby, which is a nod to the history of Maryland Heights in terms of its aircraft museum. That was an important element that was added late in the game, and thankfully airplanes are relatively light, so we didn't actually have to make any modifications to the structure to add this airplane late in the process. As you look to the north, that's where all of those community functions are. So Aquatic Center, Weight Fitness to the south, gym to the east, and community functions that are outside of that control point, really to the north, down that hall.
And I would just add some of the other credits that we got on interior were recycled content materials. So those baffles that are a key acoustic and visual element to the building, those are 50% recycled glass. And then we also earned credits for regional materials. So as we go into the gym, Colin's going to jump us into the gym, and all the CMU on the project was extracted and produced within 50 miles of the site. So that was probably the most regional material used. And so now we're in the multi-purpose gym area that serves various functions. And Tracy, do you want to tell us a little bit about the type of programming that happens in here? You don't
Absolutely.
need to, we were just,
you know, it's a little difficult to understand. Obviously, we have the gym set up right now for COVID and social distancing, and because of the number of people that were limited on the fitness floor, and there are some group elements that you cannot have right now. We have just started to introduce pickleball back into the space. That curtain that you see on the visual is basically a drop down. So we have 2 full-size basketball courts, and we have the ability to have 12 basketball hoops lowered, so people can play half court, they can play full court. On any given evening, when the schedule is resumed to what it used to be, closely to, we have the volleyball nets that come down, which is an awesome feature rather than going back to the old where you place the standards and so forth. It's nice that we can have the computerized feature that actually drops down the volleyball nets. So the blue piece that you see up against the curtain is actually part of the volleyball net that's elevated. And then you can see the basketball courts, the basketball hoops that are throughout this court. And that's almost mirrored on the opposite side of that curtain to separate both. But on any given day, we have open gym playtime. We have 3 pickleball courts on this south gym. We have the 2 volleyball nets. We have 3 badminton courts. So there's any number of times, and of course everybody that comes and uses the facility feels like that is their own court, and so we don't do a lot of sharing as adults. So we've had to have a lot of conversations with some of our members and our drop-in users on, this is a community center, so it's not just for basketball, it's not just for pickleball. So we have designated times whether it's morning, afternoon, evening, or even on weekends, to allow people to come in and use the facility. It's the cool feature too is if you look to the far back where the translucent panels are, that is the track. So the cool thing about the track is 8 laps around is a mile. And so your visual perspective as you're walking on the track, you can look down and watch. Let's say a parent comes in and drops their 10-year-old off and is part of a program. They could actually work out and walk around the track and still keep an eye on their kid with each of the laps that they take on. But we have had a lot of negotiating that has had to take place as far as use of this space. I feel like we could have 2 more full-size gyms and we still wouldn't have enough space. So it is heavily used, and right now it's being used in this manner, which isn't a lot of people, but it's giving people the opportunity to get back in and, you know, be physically active.
An interesting infrastructure item. There's not a lot of engineering innovation that happens in gyms these days, but the gym's such a large volume, we have it on its own air handling unit. And in order to reduce energy, we have 2 high volume, low velocity fans. You can kind of see just beyond the volleyball net in the middle, there's a vertical 5 horsepower motor that turns a 20-foot diameter fan. And so we can really keep the space more comfortable. We were able to achieve our thermal comfort point in this space by utilizing that fan. And it was interesting during testing bouncing, once the building was still had started to be occupied, on these large fans, just a 20% increase in velocity can really cool down and cause complaints that people are too cold, even though it's only 75 degrees, depending on their age. And so that was an interesting feature of the gym.
Yeah, I think as we talked, Mark mentioned about indoor thermal comfort. One unique thing about this is we were doing the calculations. That's all based on ASHRAE standard 55. And in version 2009, that standard is referencing the 2004 version. Had we been trying to certify this building under version 4, that version of ASHRAE 55 would have moved from 2004 to the 2010 version. We have also seen that the 2009 IEQ credits 6.2 and 7.1, which talk about the controllability of the spaces as well as the thermal comfort design, those 2 become combined when we look at version 4. So they're no longer separated credits looking at controllability versus design intent, but it becomes a singular credit that the designer has to take into consideration. And so moving out of the gym, our next stop on our tour is actually going to be moving to the 2nd floor, and we're going to start looking at the fitness area. And so I'll turn it back over to Elise to walk us through this area.
Yeah, so this is, when you first get to the top of the stair, this is the weights fitness area. And as you can see, it's a very open space with a lot of daylight and views to the outside, and visual connections to the track and down to the lobby. I was told that of all the fitness areas, this is the most used consistently throughout the week. There's always people using the equipment up here. And as you move forward into the space, you see a hallway to the left, which it has doors that lead to a number of fitness studios. So that's where some of the fitness classes take place. And then as you head back towards the windows, other credits we earned were, we got credit 4.1 and 4.3 under indoor environmental quality. So low emitting materials for floors and adhesives. So all the fitness flooring was low emitting and conformed to those standards. So now we're at the track, and you can see the really great views into the neighborhood and just the visual diversity that you get moving through the space. Makes things a lot more interesting than a standard running track, I would say. And then we'll start heading back towards the stair again. And you probably saw the visual.
If I could add just one thing. So
Sure.
all the visuals that we're looking at, obviously the equipment is spaced out because of COVID. Typically, you're not going to see fitness equipment out on the track. You're going to see more pieces of equipment that are closer together. So they've done a lot of reconfiguration. At the time that these photos were taken, the track was closed. We do now have it open. And one of the unique things is that we change the direction so your visual changes every day. And right now we don't have it open for runners. We have it just for walkers, just so that we can try to maintain that social distancing. So it complicates things, but the unique thing is that we have enough space that we're able to do this.
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually, I think we missed the original layout by maybe 2 days in terms of when we went and photographed this space before things started getting rearranged for social distancing. But Colin's going to take us downstairs now and towards the north wing of the building. And as we get over there, we're going to end up in a corridor that's really beautiful double height space. And you can see the skylights that showed in all of our site aerials. The second floor spaces have windows that take advantage of that daylight coming in. To the right, there's a dance studio or fitness studio that gets used. And then we're going to move into what's called the Millennium Room, which is a multi-purpose event space. And it connects to that courtyard beyond that David showed. And it's one big space, but it can be divided into 3 equal rooms with these Huffcore partitions. And then, so I'm going to turn it over to Tracy, who's going to talk more about these multi-generation spaces like this one, and then we'll move on to the preschool and upstairs to the senior center.
Sure. So the Millennium Rooms have really been a source of revenue for the Parks Department, and the fact that the cost to rent these is not that much. However, if you look at the pocket doors that we're looking at right now, you can rent. We can have 3 rentals happening at the same time, and because of how well the sound is absorbed with those panels, you really can have music playing or conversations taking place. In each of those rooms, we do have the AV equipment, so you can have your own projector screen that comes down. All of the blinds are on a pad, electronic pad that you can raise and lower. We have rentals that we are taking a year out. So it is a hot commodity. People want to get in here. It's new. It's well maintained. The sound baffles that you see at the top help really cut down on the loudness, if you will. The one thing is that because we do have the dance studio across the hall, a lot of times we have to close the doors just because of how loud kids can be in that hallway. But we have anything from receptions to a lot of corporate rentals to weddings, a lot of repasses, DARE graduations, you name it. We try to provide people the opportunity. It's an open space, and the cool thing is the far end of that visual is what we call rental A. And if you rent A, then you also get the kitchen, which is attached through that door. Is it's a warming kitchen. We don't have a stove, so it really is with warmers and sink. There is a opportunity to tap beer kegs. We have a lot of trivia nights that take place in there, but with normal circumstances, it's hard to get a rental in here. And the building is open from 5:30 to 9:30 Monday through Friday, and sometimes rentals go till midnight. And the same thing on the weekends. The hours are shortened by a few, but for the most part, you have to book at least 6 months to a year out to use this space.
So now I've moved us over to the preschool, which also connects to the outdoor courtyard. And Tracy, do you want to tell us more about the preschool?
Sure. So we actually have 2 classrooms, and we have experimented, I would say, in the past 3 years with what is the best workflow and the number of teachers. We do have a wait list. So we start taking children from the ages of 2 up to 5 years of age, and we have a wait list for people to come in here. I would say that probably one of the coolest things is the fact that it is self-contained. So there are washrooms right in the preschool. We have a computer lab. We have a kitchenette, and then they have access for playtime. I mean, the space is pretty big, but we also have the ability to go outside and have their own attached playground area. So it's not like we have to walk the children for long distances, but they can actually go outside and experience, the playground equipment and fresh air, and have it be gated so that they are safe. And then off to the right there, you see that there is a washroom, the water fountain. So everything really is contained. It is not an all-day class. It's only a half day in the morning and half day in the afternoon. So it's an amenity that, again, it's a hot commodity. There's a wait list to get into the preschool. So.
Yeah, it's a really great space to be in. Now we're going to move up to the second floor, which has a senior center. So Tracy, if you could tell us more about what happens here.
Sure. So one of the unique things about the community center is we have a host of seniors that live in the Maryland Heights area. And in the old facility, there really wasn't a designated place for the seniors to go. I mean, there were meeting spaces and so forth. So it was important to the mayor, council, and community members that we had a designated space that seniors could go to from the time we opened till we closed. And people come and they play pinochle, mahjong, backgammon, they watch TV. We have people that don't have computers at home, so they have the ability to play on but utilize the computer there. The TV's on, magazines. Around the corner, close to the windows, we have a library where people have donated, scads of books. So we do have people that this is their socialization. They come here, and a lot of them, there's probably, and I know that they're missing the community center right now, but a lot of them come and they're there from the time we open till probably 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's really for their social, emotional well-being. Right through that doorway, that visual we just looked at, that's a kitchen. And it's very similar to the kitchen downstairs. It's a warming kitchen, but the one thing about our seniors is they love coffee. And so coffee is always on and always hot. And they know that. And if it's not ready when they get there, they let us know. But we're very proud of that this is, for the social and emotional well-being. The other unique thing about the senior center is we have a senior recreation specialist that plans activities, and they take place in this space. This is a common space, but we also have a room called the Infinity Room. It was just on the opposite side of that kitchen, and that's where they book. It could be lectures, things that taxes take place there. So it really is geared toward the senior population. Some may consider 55 a senior. I don't, but some do. And so if you are 62 years or above, you can come in and use this without paying anything. You can just walk in. It's part of your community.
Thanks, Tracy, for highlighting these multi-generational spaces.
Sure.
So this actually is the end of the virtual 3-dimensional portion. And so we'll transition quickly back to our PowerPoint where we'll pick up on our site tour of the mechanical rooms. And so I'll turn it over at Mark if you want to begin introing the mechanical rooms.
Sure. And in my view, if you've ever seen the MTV show Cribs, this is where the magic happens. We thought about energy efficiency from the beginning. This is going to be a building that's part of the community, but the city owns it, and we did have a sustainability goal from the onset, and we've always been thinking about this. There's 4 air handling units that serve the entire building. They're all fairly large. Number 1 is the gym. It's 17,000 CFM. 2 and 3 serve the office, event space, and fitness spaces, and they're about 23,000 CFM each. And then the natatorium serves the air handler 4 serves the natatorium. It's about 32,000 CFM. 3 of those, the gym unit doesn't have an enthalpy wheel, but 2 and 3 have total energy enthalpy wheels. What you're looking at is number, it's either 2 or 3, I forget, and they're taller, takes up more space. You have to make some accommodations for them physically, but you can do no better right now with your best bang for the buck is to use total enthalpy wheels on energy recovery to reduce your total heating and cooling loads. The natatorium is a little bit different. We'll talk about that one a little bit later when we go into that room, but it uses an energy recovery loop. You're looking at 3 condensing water boilers, and the current technology, condensing water boilers, gas-fired, are about as good as you can get. They're, especially for the price. The building is not large enough to need any sort of additional heat recovery on or free cooling on the heating side. So there's 3 2500 MBH boilers, which allow for substantial turn down throughout the year. You know, you only use 1 if you need it, 2 if you need it, 3 if you need it, but if any one of them breaks, you've got the others to get you by until you can get the broken one serviced. There's 2 chillers, air-cooled chillers on the outside. We did run through some options of cooling towers, but because of the site-specific nature, the acoustics, the visuals, there are a lot of things that made a cooling tower challenging. Normally you need some sort of a space with screening or on the roof, and the architecture didn't, and the landscape architecture didn't lend itself to it. So we tried to get our energy savings elsewhere. But they were among the highest efficiency units you can get. And some of the other interesting features that we employed are in the controls, which are reset, supply reset temperatures for heating hot water and chilled water. So as the outdoor air temperature drops, we measure that and tell the controller to lower the heating hot water temperature or raise the chilled water temperature, so that nothing is working any harder than it needs to any time throughout the year. As I said, we'll get to the natatorium. It's got an interesting air handling unit set up. They're pretty unique in that regard. So Colin, I will turn it back to you.
Yeah, so Mark has mentioned a number of the energy efficiency strategies that we utilized on the project. And David even highlighted from the very beginning that the project was considerate and trying to lower not only the carbon, but the energy footprint of the building. And so for LEED, we're obviously going to be doing some energy modeling studies. Looking at the baseline building, which was defined by ASHRAE 90.1 2007 per LEED version 2009's stipulations, you can see that the site EUI baseline was about 71 kilobTUs per square foot per year. Our proposed building, utilizing the strategies that Mark mentioned, as well as having, even though we had such a translucent building, the polycarbonate systems performed better than the baseline systems as well, and same with the roofing structure and the glazing system. So all around, we had a number of energy efficiency strategies that were implemented, translating to about a 14-point EUI reduction. This translated then to about 400 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent that was removed from the air versus that baseline building. And if you're familiar with LEED energy modeling and ASHRAE energy modeling, we're looking at energy cost as our metric of comparing these two buildings. And when our building performs at a 26.3% below the baseline, we're looking at a building that is performing well against that baseline standard. If we were to consider a version 4 building or even a version 4.1 building, we're going to see that our baseline energy models are going to improve versus the version 2009. Using version 4, we'll be looking at 90.1 2010 And 4.1, we'd be looking at ASHRAE 90.1 2016, both of which will have substantial gains versus this 2007 benchmark. So considering that, anytime we're looking at doing a version 4 building or better, we're going to have to consider additional energy saving strategies above and beyond what was even implemented on this project, whether it's utilizing higher efficiency equipment, utilizing more advanced control strategies to further reduce energy usage, implementing those high volume, low velocity fans in more spaces to allow us to have a higher design temperature or a lower design temperature based on the season, or even trying to implement additional demand control ventilation strategies. And so these are a number of things that need to be considered when you're looking at a version 4 energy modeling strategies. And so that really moves us into the final space that we have. And I'll let Mark talk in a moment about some of the strategies that were implemented in here. But one thing you may notice is along the top of the building, a duct system that is a fabric duct system. In lieu of galvanized metal duct systems that may corrode in this type of environment, fabric duct was implemented to allow for a non-corrosive installation.
Yeah, and following on to that, it's lighter weights, and since we have a unique shape to the room, fabric duct allows you to have more segments and curves in the fittings that have the diffusers sewn into the fitting sections, where you're not able to do that on SMACNA constructed ducts, because you can't just arbitrarily put in a slot or some sort of an air opening wherever you want it. Well, the fabric duct is kind of designed with that in mind as it's sewn together and then tested that way. So we're able to get a lot more complex shapes that can contour the room and looks a lot better. And then we follow the ASHRAE has a pretty standard guideline for swimming pool areas on how to calculate the airflow, and you have to get a lot of airflow that washes not only up and down and in to keep fumes from building up, but you also need to wash the glass. In this case, we could only air wash the glass from the second floor. So underneath the overhang on the left side, there's a bench.
We may have lost Mark. David, do you want to talk about the design elements or the design thinking behind the natatorium while we see what happens to Mark?
Yeah, he was just getting to the good part.
Yeah.
No. Hopefully Mark will rejoin us, but I do think this is the space we're ending our tour on, and I think in some ways it's fitting since we began the tour by talking about community. And I think it's important to note that really we began looking from the outside in from the site with the starting point of being adjacent to Aquaport. And Aquaport is this amazing community amenity, but it is seasonal. And so adding an aquatic center, adding a natatorium to this building really did, for the community of Maryland Heights, extend to 365 days a year the ability to engage in water activities. And this pool is really, it's really two bodies of water in one. It's a leisure pool and a lap pool. And I don't know if there are any people in the audience who have been involved in planning rec centers or community centers like this, or bodies of water. But the swimmers are in many ways the most vocal advocates, community members of anyone. Swimmers are very, very adamant about what they want in water. And so you often find yourself in this situation, to accommodate those who are looking for the lap swim, They want to get there at, early in the morning. They want to get there at 7 a.m. and do their laps for the day. And then you have the other needs of families or people who want to do water aerobics or other kinds of activities. And so it's a delicate balancing act to try to program really two distinct bodies of water with very different programming needs in a single pool, which is what we've done here. Our aquatic consultant on the project was Councilman Hunsicker. And so, we have a lazy river, we've got different elements in the leisure side, and then we've got 3 lap lanes here. And as I said earlier, this is in the southwest corner of the building. It's in the bulbous end of the building form, if you will, and it's immediately adjacent to the parking. And so it's the space that really probably most people see as they're approaching the building, as they're driving up, as they're finding their parking space and walking into the building. But it's also harvesting and capturing all of this wonderful daylight and really warming that space. And much like the planning principles throughout the building, there's a lot of interior glass as well as exterior glass. So just you can see in this image the connection back to the weight fitness at level 2, the overhang as Mark was describing, which is where the track circumscribes the pool above at level 2. And it's just a really wonderful, warm, inviting space. And as on a personal note, my teenage son a couple years ago, shortly after the building opened, was for a brief time a lifeguard in this pool. So that's kind of fun.
David, if I could add too, I think one of the unique things about having different bodies of water that we have is maintaining a temperature of the water that appeases everybody that uses it. And yes, swimmers and aquatic people are very vocal. And so finding a balance, I think, was probably the biggest issue that we had within this space. And I think we have worked that out, but the normal user thinks that the water is too cool, and the lap swimmers think that it's too warm. And so finding a happy median took us some navigating, probably the first year that we were open.
I think Mark is back if he wants to finish saying anything about the systems in the natatorium.
Yeah, sorry about that. Technology, what can I say? The air handling unit that serves the natatorium has got it's a special pool air handling unit. It is custom for this application, but it provides dehumidification, heating, and integral energy recovery all in one unit. So it allows you, the set point design temperature is 85 degrees, because that's what, when the city polled their people or looked at their paths, that seemed to be the most comfortable for those in the pool. But we maintain 85 degrees, 50% relative humidity all year round. And then it's also got full economizer capability so that it can take advantage of the outdoor air temperatures when it suits the space. So that was really all I missed before my computer crashed.
That's all right, we got you back. That's the important part. But yeah, that concludes the virtual tour portion of tonight. So we still have a good 15 minutes or so for questions and discussion, which I think Emily is going to lead for us.
Yes, I am. So if folks want to put their questions into the chat, then we can kind of target those at the right presenter. We have a couple here already specific to the pool, since that's the topic we were just on. So I'll ask those questions first. Is the pool bromine or chlorine? Anybody?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't know if my memory serves me well enough to know what they were using in the pool. I don't know if anyone else on the team does.
Well,
It is chlorine, David. It is a chlorine pool.
yeah, and when we were going through the design process, there was a point in time where it could go either way, but it was safer to design all the vapor barriers and all the materials around the chlorine.
Great, thanks for that. And then a couple other questions related to the pool. How many separate bodies of water are there in the pool area, and what are the depths of the pools?
So this is Tracy again. There are 3 separate bodies. We have a 0 depth that's like in the middle of the pool area. And then we have the other body of water that has the current channel, a 4-foot depth area with the lap lanes. And then there's a deep well that is 9 feet that we have 2 climbing walls, and we also have a drop slide for that. So I don't know that you could actually see that on that visual because of the angle that we were at. But if you recall the 3 girls sitting on the pool side, it would have been to the immediate right.
Great, thanks, Tracy.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So going back to the different building schemes that David presented at the beginning, there's a question about those. Is the fish version smaller or equivalent size to the other schemes that were presented?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, so we designed all of the concepts to be identical in terms of their program area. So they were all 92,000 square foot concepts. Of course, we were in schematic design, so there was probably plus or minus 5% on that. But they were all equivalent in size and just radically different in their organization and form. And as I said earlier, I think one of the attractions around the fish scheme is not only how it organized the program and how it addressed the site, but the fact that it was in some ways most efficient in terms of skin to floor area ratio. It was the most consolidated. So, particularly that split scheme had a lot of skin to that 92,000 square foot program area. So I think that was attractive from a budget perspective to the city council as well.
Great, thanks, David. There are a couple questions here related to the LEED review process. So I don't know, Elise, if these are for you. But the first is, how did the LEED reviewers, or how did you interpret the occupants of the building in terms of full-time employees, part-time employees, and occupants?
This is Colin. It was a little bit of a challenge navigating those occupant counts. It was something that did come up in the initial review. And I know one of the biggest things that we had to navigate through was ensuring that occupants were counted equivalently throughout all the credits, whether it be for the water efficiency, the indoor water efficiency, for the energy usage, and even then for the occupant counts earlier in the LEED submission. But I think it was also in conjunction with some of the previous head counts that they had gotten on the facility previously, trying to consolidate some of the program features into this building. So I don't know if that's a great answer to that, but that was some of the things that went into it.
Consistency, that's what you need across all those credits in LEED, right? And then let's see, there's a question here about wondering what building code version the project was designed under. If you know that.
It was designed under IBC 2009.
Okay. Thanks. And then let's see. So we've got a bunch of questions coming in now. So it looks like there were ceiling sound baffles in the workout room. I think that's where those were. Yeah. And look like there were lighting between those baffles. Is that the case? And if so, did that affect lighting efficiency?
Yeah, this is David. I can jump in on that. We did study the elevation of the bottom of the light fixture with regard to the bottom edge of the baffles. And we studied that at several different elevations. We were trying to find this balance between some cutoff on the luminaire. So as one looked across the space, the lights were not the dominant element versus that efficiency that you're talking about. And I think we struck the appropriate balance there where we got the cutoff we wanted, but really didn't lose efficiency in the luminaire. Plus the baffles, there was some indirect bounce off of those baffles too. So I think it was pretty successful in that regard.
Great, thank you. Tracy, did you have something to add to that?
No, I agree with what David is saying. I mean, we see it from, 5:30 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, whether it's in the winter months when it's dark when you get there and dark when you leave, to the natural sunlight that comes in, and it's very well lit, and there's not what I would call a dead space where you can't see because of how the sound baffles hang and the light fixtures.
Got it. So I'm going to jump to this most recent question that came in, asking how the current energy consumption compares to the design now that it's been open a few years. Has there been any energy benchmarking happening of this building?
I have not taken the data that Canon presented, obviously, when the design of this building happened, and compare it. I think it would be an interesting study just to compare. We've been open for over 3 years now. So I think it would be a great thing to go and see if what was presented is actually what's happening.
Yeah, I was paused to see if Colin was going to reply, but we would like to do that. We just haven't.
Great. So maybe we need a benchmarking requirement in Maryland Heights like they have in the city to make sure that happens. There is a couple questions about things that aren't in the building that came up here in the feed, and so I want to put that out there. There's not a green roof. I don't know if that was originally planned for the design, but it's a question of why that may not have been incorporated. And then related to the roof, it seems like there could have been the opportunity for solar. So wondering if there's any feedback on those two elements.
Yeah, I'll speak to the green roof. We did present it as a 100% green roof initially, and I think that like there often is, there was some unfamiliarity with green roof technology. We have to put this into context of the fact that this was 6 years ago, so green roofs weren't quite as prevalent as they are today, or as commonplace. And I think from this being a building that was being operated by the Public Works Department, they weren't sure about maintaining that. There were also, because it's a very large roof area, there was some concerns from our engineering team about exactly how that was going to be drained. So that idea was really scaled back. I have to say I don't recall the discussion on PV, whether we had it or not. Maybe one of the engineers, Colin or Mark, recall.
At the beginning during schematic design, and I see another question on other types of discussions that were had, there was a lot of items on the board for consideration. We did do some simple payback on other more common systems like VAV with reheat and things like that, and those didn't pass the model by themselves, so we needed to add the enthalpy wheels. And then we got to where we were meeting the goal and for the budget, and there was a budget, and solar, and particularly in this part of the country, just is a really expensive first cost that there was a maintenance item because of the unique roof and the roofing system that was used. So yeah, we did look at a number of things. Everything was open-minded and on the table, and then we just, either through practical nature, comfort level with the city, and first cost and operating costs, we just kind of whittled down to where we ended.
Got it. Mark, do you want to maybe keep the floor and talk about the heat recovery on the project? There's a question that we'd be interested to hear a little more in how that heat recovery was discussed during the conceptual and schematic design.
Well, yeah, so following on to what I was saying is, you know, we looked at whether sensible only would need to occur. We originally had cooling towers, and kind of all of it is, you know, you have really a basket of strategies to meet the goal and fit in the building with the program. You have another basket, because if you have a cooling tower, for example, you don't really need to look at free cooling on the chilled water side, and so forth. So we had a few baskets that we started with, and each one had a different heat recovery strategy. But also, you know, having done this many times in this part of the country, you know, we know where to kind of hone in on, to keep things out of custom sizes, also to you know, adapt to the program areas. So there was, you know, enthalpy wheels was probably a little progressive for the city at the time that we were designing this. And so, you know, that was kind of a step that was innovative at the time for their portfolio of buildings, and to get us where we needed to go. Did that answer the question? And without enthalpy, you know, on labs and other kind of sensible only heat recovery, we just weren't going to get where we needed to be without other more costly conservation measures.
I just thought of a comment that might be interesting to share with the group, is that part of the LEED certification, we did add those energy efficient parking spaces. And one of the things that we noted was that the general public does not understand what certification is about. There were a lot of seniors that utilized the facility and felt like that those should be ADA parking spaces, and that if they saw a big Cadillac parked in there, they wanted us to get the police involved. So I would say, from a communication perspective, whatever you're doing as far as certification, that's communicated well, and maybe within the facility there's information that talks about that, because I cannot tell you the number of calls that myself personally and other rec managers receive, you know, please need to come and tow this car, not understanding that. And that has come to light most recently because we are actually working with Ameren. They do have the electric charging stations that they are offering grant money for. So we are looking at taking some of those spaces that we have and turning them into charging stations.
Great. So there is a question that came in asking whether you might be able to share the construction cost and schedule duration, if that's possible. I don't know.
I'm doing this from memory. It seems like it's been a long time ago. I want to say that it was around a $30,000 project, of which the city paid half of that, and then we went and got bonds for the remainder.
30 million.
Yeah, 30 million. I'm sorry, 30 million.
That was, and I'm also going from memory, Tracy, but that was total project cost. So the construction cost, I think, was something less than that. And then I think there was money from, I'm probably not going to use the politically correct term, but from the casino revenue.
Well, that came out of the general fund that we have.
Okay.
So Maryland Heights, because we have the ability to use tax dollars that are generated through the casino, we had a healthy reserve fund, which is why they were able to utilize some of those reserves to pay down, so we didn't have to borrow for this whole building.
Great. I actually have a question. I'm not related to the user experience. I mean, Tracy, you talked a little bit about the people not having a connection to what LEED certification means, but I'm wondering if you've heard, I mean, it seems like there's an emphasis on daylighting and indoor air quality in this building, and I'm wondering if the users have responded to that, or you hear comments about that, or
You know, I think early on there were a lot of questions, you know, why this and how come you chose that, and just kind of educating people. When we first opened, we were giving tours where actually staff could walk around and talk about some of the features of this building. And I would recommend, while this presentation is awesome and it highlights some key things, it still does not do it justice when you can actually walk in and see the features and the nuances and the traffic flow and so forth. But there were a lot of questions early on, but now, you know, it has become more of a staple in the community, and so people are used to that. And I have watched members bring in new members and educate people on that. You know, why is there a plane hanging in the middle of the foyer? And understanding the history and the connectivity with Creve Coeur Airport and the city of Maryland Heights to, you know, what are those funny looking shields on the wall? And why are those baffles hanging up above the ceiling? And just, you know, all types of questions in regards to that. The fact that we have 186 panes of glass throughout the building, and talk about the daylight. So there's a lot of questions that started early on, but as time has gone on, it's just, you know, people are educating new members and newcomers to the facility.
Well, we are right at the 7 o'clock mark, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up the program tonight. I want to thank the team at Canon for their great work on the tour this evening, and thanks to Tracy and Maryland Heights for hosting us. Encourage everyone when they feel comfortable to get out and take a look at this building in person as well. It seems like it's a really great project and an even better community asset. So a reminder that we have a coffee break on the calendar for next Friday, July 24th, with Katie Meisterla, an in-depth session on lighting on July 30th, and our next evening program in August will be in partnership with ASHRAE St. Louis, featuring Jenny Carney from WSP. She will be talking about energy efficiency measures with resiliency benefits. So thanks everyone for joining us this evening, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.